Do you want me to talk about what? Again? Religion and human rights. Wow. That's a very interesting topic to talk about. I imagine you already know the answer to the questions. Probably you can refer to the books that you study. Welcome back to my channel. Today's topic, I think we're going to discuss about something which is very, very interesting. About religion and also human rights. I think before I start to discuss about this topic, first of all, please subscribe to my channel and also click the bell in order for you to continue to listen and also watch my future videos. Okay, when talk about religion and human rights, there's also article published a few years ago saying that they're compatible between religions and human rights. If you're asking me personally, I think it's compatible, in many ways, because I think the idea about human rights begins, through religions, because when people embrace religion, starting to embrace religion, I think they already talk about right to the people, right to God and everything, and right to the community as well, And then I think if you notice, from the beginning, even during the period of pre-Socrates, the period of Greek civilization, you can see that the argument from Cicero, for example, and that's I think already come out with the idea of religions and the religions play significant roles to define human rights. And I think the first point that I want to raise here to see how religion and human rights come together, actually from the concept of divine rules, natural rights, and also against or probably vis-a-vis legal rights. That the traditions of human rights actually exist from the religious perspective. I think if you whatever religion that you embrace, for example, Islam come early and also give a divine perspective of human life, with a reason and so on. And similarly, in the context of Christianity in Europe, for example, it come up from the idea of divine rules and so on. However, since the period of Renaissance in 15th and 16th century, and you can see that the shift of movement to define the concept of natural law and also natural right, which also still looking in the context of religion, but the problem, the only thing is they remove the idea about divine king, because somehow many king argue that they are descendant of God or descendant of people, or because they are ruler, they have certain divine rules in them. So I think that's the rejection that come out from the from the beginning. So then, when the idea of natural right came about, there are scholars like in the Western perspective, like Thomas Hobbes, for example, that argue about the state of mind, argue about the concept of state of nature, when human beings are very brutal and so violence, and this require a social contract between the rules and rulers in that perspective. So, and from there, I think the idea about rights as well as obligation also came about, because from Thomas Hobbes' perspective, right always in association with obligation. Then later on comes scholars like John Locke, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, for example, they argue in terms of social contract as well, but looking in the perspective that human beings is normal, but of course there should be a binding relation between the rule and also the rulers in order to bring peace and security to the nations. That I think when to define the concept of rights, in the concept of natural right, actually looking in the concept of values, practice, and also based on culture and also custom of certain society, which make that this is actually the original idea of human right that we understand today. For example, like during this period as well, John Locke, for example, come up with the classical idea of individual's right, which is the argument saying that the right should be are three, right to life, right to liberty, and also right to properties. Because you have to understand during the context of the society during that period is very very suppressed by the rulers, so they have to come up with this idea in order to fight for themselves against the rulers. And there's a symbiosis, also a relation between the rulers and also the rule, which make the society in upholding certain rights that they believe that should belong to them. So that, I think, the concept of natural rights begins, and also natural law came about, which I think still influenced with the idea of divine rules. But for many society during that period, even in the Muslim society, natural law actually referring to the way of life of the people, where life actually guided by the practices in the religions, because religion bring about certain rules and practices which need to be followed by all people who embrace that religion. So similar that Islam, we have like rules and regulations like Sharia law, for example, we have to follow. Similarly, in the Christianity perspective, also in Judaism, for example, Judaism, they have very strict rules based on Torah, for example. So that whoever embrace Judaism need to follow the law. So that's, I think, the idea of natural law emerged. And the stress on morality also very strong in this context. However, it's different between the context of legal law, for example. Legal law mostly based on human law and established by human, even though we cannot say that it's totally against religion, for example, because the concept of legal law actually also embrace certain aspect of morality and certain aspect of natural law based on religion that being practiced. Whether religion actually against human rights, which I think I totally disagree. Because all the idea about religion is to bring peace and security and safety to the humankind. So that's how Islam, because Islam, the meaning of Islam is peace. And Allah always praise and bring mercy to the people. So that's why I think religion, the concept of religion is very important to the people who embrace that religion. Not only Islam, other religion as well. So it never actually embrace or never actually propagate any violence against the people. For example, like Islam, because I cannot say much about Christianity and also Judaism or other religion like Hindus, so on. But I believe they also have certain kind of perspective. But in the case of Islam actually the one through Al-Quran and also the Sunnah actually already mentioned about the rules of war, for example. Meaning that during the war you cannot kill children, civilians, cannot kill women, cannot destroy kill tree, for example, animals. So meaning that there's a perspective of rules. Even though Islam, for example, allow the use of force, but it's only allowed from the context of self-defense. You cannot become the aggressor in the war. So I think those who you can see from terrorism, war in Syria and also Iraq, for example, ISIS. So this, I think, probably how the people manipulate religion to suit their cause for violence, which I don't believe is Islamic in that context, But if you look on the Islam perspective, it's really clear that the idea about Islam is to bring peace and security, safety to all humankind, So it depends on how you subscribe the religion itself, and religion itself will guide you how to become the good individual and good person. So I think that's the interesting about religion, which is, I think, this really compatible with human rights, which are human rights. It gives right to the people to ensure that people live in peace and security and also liberty as well. The way of life, as we know that one who embrace religion, they have to really accept it and also apply the religion. So no matter if you are Christian, Judaism, you are Jewish, embracing Judaism, or you embrace Hinduism, so on, and Buddhism as well. You actually try to live the way that being asked with guidance by the religion. So that's, I think, the most important thing. Unless if you are thinking that you disregard religion totally, you have become atheist and so on. Probably religion is not your things in your life. But I think when it comes to the way of life, that's why religion actually plays significant roles that trigger changes in the society. For example, like in Islam, I think since the beginnings, Prophet Muhammad SAW really against slavery. In fact, he to release Bilal ibn Rabah, for example, because he was slave and then suffer under his honor, when and he is actually the one. Prophet Muhammad also the one who really propagate anti-racism. So I think this is a very crucial of the religion, because religion plays a role towards certain changes in society, which is really anti-slavery, anti-racism, and so on. And even in terms of women, women play significant roles, different role in the society, so on. So equal right given to the women as well, but sometimes they have responsibility and duty to perform in religion. So if you study closely, for example, in Islam, you can see that women be given such privilege in terms of property, in terms of inheritance and so on. I'm not sure about other religions, because I know probably more well about Islam, but I think similar thing probably happen as well in other religion. So in this context, I think by embracing religion, actually it gives rights to the people on certain things. It doesn't have to be, including the issue of civil and political rights. Even when I talk about racism, it's regarding civil rights, political rights as well. So religion actually uphold the need for human rights not only in the classical context but also in the modern context right today. There's also discussion regarding human dignity and also human rights. Are they compatible? So more or less is compatible, but I think you need to understand the debates on this. Okay, this is very interesting. Why in the region normally the thing that they propagate is human dignity, the dignity of the people. Because I give you one context, the issue of wearing veil. I know certain countries, for example like France, tried to ban wearing veil. In Turkey also, they used to be banned. But in reality is that there are debates on this. For example, liberals, group of liberals also divided on this context. Some liberals argue that wearing veil actually as the symbols of discrimination, meaning that should be banned. But sometimes there's another liberal saying why you need to ban such wearing, such as dress, up to them to wear. They can wear whatever they want. That's a freedom of choice. So you can see in here there are conflict between two arguments. But when you ask them, particularly the Muslim, for example, why they wear veil, for example, or headscarf, so on. So they will argue that they actually following the teaching of Prophet, and so the following the life of great woman. For example, like Mary, mother of Jesus. Mother of Jesus always wear veil. So why you say you want to ban veil, but at the same time so you embrace Mary, mother of Jesus, So there's a great debate from religious perspective. And also when you ask the woman why they're wearing veil, because they never been forced to wear veil, but they wear veil because of they following the God teaching, and also there's the element of modesty in the perspective. So that's, I think, referring to the context of dignity. So the right of people to practice certain right that they have, actually because they have reason to that, reason of dignity, even prosperity. So meaning that nobody can dictate people and claim, if they're doing something, it's considered discrimination and so on, But we need to see the context of people practice on certain things. So that's something very interesting when I argue about will, and I think you can argue on many things as well. Freedom of religion. Okay, freedom of religion also embraced under the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and also the international law. Many of international law. I think all countries, all religion somehow embrace it or practice this. Meaning that they allow, they want to practice their own religion, but at the same time they won't forbid other people to practice their own religion. So certain countries will give protection to certain people to practice their own religion. But of course, this issue also very controversial when discussed about if somebody want to leave the religion. So some religion, I think almost all religion forbid their believer to leave their belief. So that's I think normal for all the religion. And certain country very strict into that as well, particularly the Muslim countries. But other countries, which I think like in Europe or in Africa, for example, when you can see that the level of believing in the region also decreasing, then I think you can see that they have different approach in looking of context of freedom of religion. But in reality, I think all countries allow freedom of religions, but if you talk about in the context of my countries, for example Malaysia, this actually practice under the constitutions. But if somebody want to leave religion, they are meaning that all details need to be observed, before they can leave, because there are certain rules and practices, particularly with regard to the Muslim. I think a bit different in Malaysia compared to the other countries. But in reality, actually, according to, for example, scholars like Zakir Naik, that if somebody want to leave Islam, also difficult for us to stop to leave Islam, because they say, many scholars also believe that is up to individuals whether they want to enter or leave religion. Based on their consciousness as well about religion, not really contradict with the idea of freedom of religion that embraced by our international standards on human rights. Theory of human rights. There's a theory of universalism versus theory of cultural relativism, because this debate as well involve religion. Okay, for example, theory of universalism. In fact, if you look on the idea of natural law, for example, they also talk about universality of religion practiced by everybody. So that's also very interesting. But this idea, when it comes to the current context, universalism always propagate that every values, every right should be universal. But they are referring to the individual's rights. Practice should be practiced around the world, which I believe in the context of human rights, which is very universal. Of course, in certain practices of right, there are differences from country to countries, because the way the practice also sometimes depend on the country, what to prioritize and what to practice. Because certain countries probably practice certain rights more than the others. So that's, I think, natural and normal in many countries. But that's, I think, perspective of human rights that we can understand, universalism. But in the context of cultural relativism, the argument is almost rejecting the idea of universalism of human rights, which I think also, it's not right, because in human life, around the world, we should have standards in practicing human rights. Even though the argument solid, some of the argument I think valid when saying that there should not be certain similar practice around the world with our current context, because sometimes the standard human right that practice in one country depending on culture, custom that practice in that country, which I think there's argument, a solid argument in that context as well. But in reality, I think the best way is to come up the way to accommodate these two ideas. Because for me, I believe that human rights is very universal, but of course in certain practices should be based on the local perspective. That's why I think you can see in 1990s there's a debate on these issues, and people who propagating Asian values, for example, very critical to the idea of universalism of human rights, because they see that universalism of human rights is having a tendency to propagate certain values, the idea from the West to the other countries, which they are rejecting those ideas. But the problem is the critique of many people against Asian values, also saying that this all propagating by leaders who want to suppress the people and very autocratic in their rules in the country, so on and so forth. So for me, I can believe in certain argument from universalism perspective, and also I also believe certain argument which is valid from cultural relativism. So the most important thing is try to harmonize between these two, because these two can be combined and practiced more better. If when we talk about country that practice which, I think the idea of religion and also custom, culture play a significant role in that country. So yes, there's certain practices which I think probably bring a huge debate in the current context. For example, the issue of LGBT. LGBT can create a debate among people, because the practice of LGBT, for example, gay, homosexuals, lesbian, this I think totally against religion, but it already accepted as a human rights in a global context. That I think subject to countries to accept or not, because certain country embrace certain religion, and religion become part of the structure of legal system, for example, in that country. So because of that, if that's the region saying that they are against this kind of practices, so meaning that it's within their rights to reject on the practices, for example, the practice of LGBT. So that's why I think human rights can accommodate things, but sometimes also if there are certain human rights which is I think not suit with the custom and belief of the countries, then they can simply put aside and also practice which is a more in their priorities to be practices. But in overall, I think this debate about human rights will continue, and depends on society. If society change, then and the change actually if compatible with religion, then I think easily the idea about rights can be accommodated. But if not, then difficult to accommodate. Because I cannot see that religion can simply change, to accommodate certain practices which I think against religion. That's why I think because religion set up only rules and regulations to practice in life, because it's a way of life. So that's why sometimes new things which contradict, then probably religion will not accept. People who pray religion will not accept that kind of perspective. But in reality, is that both can come together when there's a compatibility between the practices in two aspects. International human rights law and also international humanitarian law, I think it's clear. Also, there's no contradictions, particularly when it comes to international human rights law. You can see that issue of crimes against humanity, war crime, ethnic cleansing, genocide, all I think considered as just cogent, which is I think forbidden by all countries. And also at the same time, all region actually against this idea of crime, worst of the worst kind of crime. So I think that's why all region also saying that they are against this kind of practices. And also when it comes to human rights law, I think we have many laws on human rights. For example, there's a convention against torture. I don't think any religion allow torture in practice. Yes, I think there's some certain differences when it comes to practices, particularly when issue with regard to issue of, for example, civil law, marriage, divorce, or even inheritance, change of religion, or even there's certain probably differences that imply. In fact, in the context of ISET, for example, you can see that even US also make certain reservation, on hate speech, for example, because they don't agree on the context of hate speech, even though hate speech is very detrimental to the society if allowed to be practiced, and because it can create conflict. Almost all Muslim countries also embrace ISET, except for only two countries, which is Brunei and my country, Malaysia. So, but in general, already can accept the concept of international law practice, but only certain kind of differences they can put into reservation to be practiced. So, in reality, it's all countries who are believe in the religion also doesn't have any problem to practice international human rights law. But the problem that persists is that the most violator of international law, which is Israel, always managed to withdraw themselves from practicing any international law, even though they argue in the context of international law. Because what happened in Israel right now is the apartheid state, and also suppressed against the Palestinians on clearly in violation of international law, which I think if they believe that they are practicing religion, actually they're not. They're actually really anti human life, anti peace, which I think we need to challenge and fight against them. So that's, I think, the situation of the current context of international law, which I think compatible with the idea about religions. Rights, duty, and obligation, and also responsibility. I think there's also argument saying that actually rights actually belong to God in many religions, particularly Islam. Rights belong to God. The human perspective, the people perspective should be practicing those rights, which when you practice the right becomes a duty and responsibility for you. So I think whatever good thing that you do, in life, you need to balance all those things. And what you serve, actually, you serve the God. So because the God whole perspective of right, and what you need to do is that you perform the duty asked to you by the God. So that's, I think, the always a bit different in looking in the context of religion and also human rights. Even though in terms of the reality of this is almost similar, because certain people who are probably non-believer, so they're looking in the context of right is just simply a right to do this, right to get this, or something like that. But in religion, for those who practice religion, what they perform of those rights, actually they perform in order to serve also the duty and responsibility to God. So that's the difference. I hope you can understand this context. A bit not really complex, but that's the way how to interpret, give reasoning to idea of life to serve the right in order to ensure that you are performing your duty to the God. So thank you very much for listening to the video, and hopefully you can have better understanding about this. I know this is something difficult actually to discuss, but somehow we need to discuss this, continues to discuss it in order to get ideas and understanding. The majority of idea of human rights also come from religion. So of course, whenever human rights want to practice, always religion plays a significant role to influence the practices of human rights. So in that notes, and don't forget to subscribe my channel, and because I will bring more and more of issue to discuss and give a perspective of us and better understanding and knowledge, get benefit from this kind of discussion.